The ring on my sister's hand cost $4,000. I know because I paid for it. She does not know that I know. She thinks I believe the story she told me 2 months ago, the one where Theo's money disappeared. Emergency medical bills, she said, her voice cracking on the phone the way it always cracks when she needs something. The money went out the next morning. $4,000 from a savings account 8 years in the making. No questions asked. No proof requested. That is what I do. That is what I have always done. There is something you should know about what I do for a living because it matters later. Hospital billing coordinator. The job means processing insurance claims, cross-referencing patient records, flagging discrepancies between what providers charge and what carriers approve. 40 hours a week making sure the numbers match. The discrepancies show themselves whether anyone wants to see them or not. The discrepancies were there with Kristen, plain as a billing error on a Tuesday morning. But this time, looking away was easier than looking close. The dinner was at the Brennan House in Glastonbury, a brick colonial with black shutters and a front yard that looked like someone paid a service to keep it that specific shade of green. Theo's parents, his mother Connie, had set the table for 10, white cloth napkins folded into triangles, and there was a centerpiece made of hydrangeas that I could tell she had arranged herself because one side was slightly fuller than the other. I notice things like that. Most people do not. That is either my greatest skill or my biggest problem, depending on the day. Kristen was already seated when I arrived. She was wearing a cream dress and the ring, and she was laughing at something Theo's brother had said, her hand resting on Theo's arm in a way that was casual and calculated at the same time. She is good at that. She has always been good at that. My sister works in marketing, and she treats every room she enters like a campaign. Theo stood when I came in. He shook my hand, held it 1 beat longer than a normal handshake. His eyes did something I could not read, not then. Later I would understand what that look meant, but at that table, in that moment, I thought he was just being polite. My seat was between Connie and Theo's grandmother, a woman named Bet who had flown in from Michigan and who smelled like lavender and spoke only when she had something worth saying. Connie asked about my work, and when I told her, she nodded the way people nod when they understand what 40 hours of paperwork feels like. She had been a school nurse for 22 years. We understood each other within 3 sentences. Then Connie turned to Kristen. Friendly, warm, just making conversation. And what does your sister do, Kristen? My sister looked at me. She smiled. It was the smile she has been practicing since she was 12 years old, the one that makes everyone in the room think she is being playful when she is being precise. She looked at Connie, then at Theo's grandmother, then back at Connie. Oh, Dana? She waved her hand, the one with the ring. My ring. She is the maid. Scrubs floors, washes dishes, that is all she is good for. She laughed. A few people at the table laughed with her. The polite kind of laugh people give when they are not sure if something is a joke, but do not want to be the one who does not get it. Connie did not laugh. Her face went still. Not angry. Still. The kind of still that a woman learns after 22 years of watching children be cruel to each other and knowing exactly when the cruelty is real. My eyes went to Kristen, then to the ring on her hand. My ring. Silence. That is my first language. 30 years of fluency. 3 seconds passed, maybe 4. And then something happened that had never happened before in my entire life. I set my napkin on the table, I pushed my chair back, I stood up. The room went quiet. I want to clarify something, I said. My voice was level, not shaking, not crying. Just doing what I do at work when the numbers are wrong and someone needs to hear it. For 5 months, I bathed my sister every day because she could not stand in a shower, drove her to 43 physical therapy appointments, cooked 147 meals, and brought them to her hospital room, slept in a chair next to her bed for the first 6 weeks because she was afraid of being alone at night after her surgery, filed her insurance claims when her provider denied coverage, paid $11,000 in medical bills her insurance would not cover. All of this while working full-time And while she told her friends and her fiancé that I barely visited, nobody moved. That is what the maid did. The chair received me back, napkin smoothed. Hands in my lap, Theo set down his fork. Not quickly, slowly, the way someone sets something down when they have already made a decision and are just waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. He looked at Kristen. His face was calm. His voice was not. Kristen. Quiet. Every syllable measured. What did your sister do when you were in the hospital for 5 months? Kristen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And who paid for this ring? The table was so quiet that Bet's oxygen concentrator could be heard humming softly from the living room. Kristen looked at Theo, then at me, then back at Theo. Her mouth moved, started to form a sentence, stopped, started again. You gave me the money for. She trailed off. She had heard it the moment the words left her mouth. Theo gave her the money. Everyone heard her say it. And Theo was asking who paid, which meant Theo already knew the answer, which meant the story she had built, the careful architecture of who she was and who I was and who deserved what, was coming apart in real time. At her own engagement dinner, in front of the people she needed most to believe her. My hand went into my bag. I have something I would like everyone to hear. The phone was already unlocked. The recording was already cued. Not because I had planned this, because an ISTJ who works in hospital billing does not delete voicemails, does not erase call logs, and does not throw away receipts. Everything is filed. Everything has a date, and this particular file had been sitting in a folder labeled Kristen since the night she called me crying about the ring. This is a phone call from 2 months ago, I said. My sister called me asking for help. Diane stood halfway out of her chair. Dana, let's not do this here. This is your sister's night. We are doing this here, Mom. My voice did not rise. Because not here is how we got to this table. Diane sat back down. Her mouth opened and closed once. Like a door someone changed their mind about walking through. The recording played. Kristen's voice first. Thin. Cracking. The specific pitch she uses when she needs something she does not want to ask for. Dana, I need help. Theo gave me money for the ring, but I had to use it for emergency bills from the hospital. Copays and a balance they said was overdue. I have nothing left. Can you help me? My voice flat and immediate. How much do you need? 4,000. I will pay you back, I promise. Okay, that was it. 41 seconds. The whole recording. My sister asking and me saying, okay. The silence that followed was not the polite kind. It was the kind where people are doing math they do not want to do. Theo gave Kristen money for a ring. Kristen told me that money was gone. Kristen asked me for the same amount. The ring was on her hand. My money was on her finger. And every person at that table could see it. Connie's hand was over her mouth. Martin had set down his fork for the first time all evening and placed both hands flat on the table, the way a man does when he is deciding whether to speak or wait. Bet, Theo's grandmother from Michigan, looked at the ring, then at Kristen, then, very slowly, at Theo. Kristen moved first. That recording is out of context. She is manipulating the situation. She always does this. She has always been jealous of me. And now she is trying to ruin my engagement because she cannot stand that I am happy. Her voice was louder than it needed to be. Marketing voice. Campaign mode. But the room was not buying. When you have just heard a woman's own voice on a recording, context does not work the way it usually does. Theo spoke without looking away from Kristen. Out of context, he repeated her words back to her the way a teacher repeats a wrong answer. Not cruelly, but precisely. You told me you bought this ring with your own savings. You said that in my car the night we picked it up. And you said it again when my mother asked about it last week. He paused. Twice. Kristen's eyes moved to Diane. Mom, tell them she has always been like this. Diane did not move. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was the face of a woman who has spent 30 years building a wall out of phrases like, "Let's not do this here," and "You know how she is," and who has just watched someone drive a truck through the middle of it. She said nothing. That was the first time in my life my mother did not defend Kristen. Not because she had chosen my side, because she had run out of walls. Theo stood, pulled his chair in, straightened his jacket, every movement precise, unhurried, the way a person moves when they are holding something together by sheer mechanics, because the feelings have not caught up yet. "I need to go," he said. "Theo, please, let me explain." He looked at Kristen for a long time. Then he looked at me. The look lasted 2 seconds. A nod. Small. Almost invisible. Not "thank you" and not "I am sorry." But something in between that did not need words. Then he walked through the kitchen, past the hydrangea centerpiece Connie had arranged that morning, and out the back door. The sound of a car starting. Then gravel. Then nothing. Martin picked up his napkin, folded it in half, set it beside his plate, looked at Connie. Connie looked at the table. Neither of them spoke, and in that silence was a complete conversation that only 34 years of marriage can hold. Kristen was still standing. Her hands were shaking. The ring caught the chandelier light and threw a small rainbow across the tablecloth, which was the kind of detail that should not matter but did. Dana. Her voice was different now. Smaller. Not the marketing voice. The other one. The one she used at 3 a.m. during the worst week in the hospital, when the pain medication wore off early and she could not reach the call button. "Why would you do this?" "Because you called me the maid," I said, in front of people who were meeting me for the first time. "While wearing a ring I bought you. After 5 months of my life that you erased, nothing else to say." So nothing else was said. "It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Brennan," I said to Connie on my way out. "I am sorry it was like this." Connie caught my arm. Her grip was firm, school nurse firm. 22 years of holding children who did not want to be held firm. "Do not you dare apologize," she said. Quiet. Absolute. The drive home took 22 minutes. The radio stayed off. The windows stayed up. My hands were steady on the wheel. Steady through the left turn onto Route 9. Steady past the gas station where Kristen and I used to buy slushies when we were kids, and the world was a place where sisters were on the same side. Steady all the way home. And then, in the driveway, with the engine still running and the headlights pointing at my front door, my hands started shaking. Not during. After. That is how it works with me. The body waits until the job is done, and then it tells you what the job cost. But the dinner was only the beginning. Because what nobody at that table knew, what Theo and I had agreed to keep between us, was that he had already heard the truth 2 weeks before that dinner. On a Tuesday evening, when he showed up at my door wanting to yell at me for being a terrible sister, and left an hour later unable to speak. That story starts with a knock. The knock came on a Tuesday at 6:45 in the evening, 2 weeks before the dinner. 2 weeks before the ring and the recording and the look on Connie Brennan's face that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I was standing at the kitchen counter cutting bell peppers for a stir-fry that I would eat alone, the way I eat most meals. The knife was sharp. The peppers were red and green. The apartment smelled like sesame oil. These are the kinds of details I remember, because my brain stores the ordinary moments right next to the extraordinary ones, and sometimes the ordinary ones are louder. The man at the door was tall, early 30s, with the kind of posture that people who stand in front of classrooms develop over time, shoulders back, chin level, hands visible. He was wearing a corduroy jacket with a pen clipped to the inside pocket, and his face carried the specific expression of someone who has rehearsed what he is about to say, but is not entirely sure the words will come out in the right order. "Are you Dana Calloway?" "Yes. My name is Theo Brennan. Your sister's fiancé." He paused. "May I come in?" There are moments when the body knows something before the mind catches up. My hand tightened on the doorframe. Not because I was afraid of him, because his name was the name Kristen had been saying for 8 months, with the voice she reserves for things she considers achievements, and hearing it attached to an actual person standing on my doorstep at dinner time meant something was about to change. "Come in." He sat on the edge of my couch the way people sit when they do not plan to stay long. Elbows on knees, hands clasped. He looked at the floor for about 10 seconds before he spoke. "Kristen told me about the time you spent at the hospital when she was recovering." His voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who teaches teenagers for a living and has learned that tone matters more than volume. "She told me you were controlling, that you made decisions about her care without asking, that you treated her like a patient instead of a sister." The bell peppers were still on the counter. The knife was still on the cutting board. The sesame oil was starting to smoke slightly because I had forgotten to turn off the burner. "She said you barely visited the last 2 months, that you got tired of it, that you made her feel like a burden." Each sentence landed in a specific place. Controlling, barely visited, burden. These were not Kristen's feelings. These were Kristen's talking points. Carefully chosen, strategically deployed. My sister works in marketing, and she markets everything, including her own history. "I need to understand," Theo said, "because the woman I am about to marry told me her sister treated her badly during the worst 5 months of her life. And I need to know if that is true before I sit across from you at a dinner table and pretend everything is fine." He was not yelling. He was not threatening. He was doing what a good man does when someone he loves tells him she was hurt. He was showing up. The wrong person, the wrong door. But showing up, "Wait here," I said. The folder was in the second drawer of my filing cabinet, behind the tax returns and ahead of the car insurance. Manila. Labeled. Tabbed by month. 5 tabs. 5 months. The habit of a woman who processes medical records for a living, and who has never in her life thrown away a document that had a date on it. I set it on the coffee table in front of him. Open to the first tab. These are photocopies of the hospital visitor log for St. Francis Medical Center, February through June of last year. My name appears on every single page. 147 entries. 1 for each day my sister was admitted. Theo looked at the first page, then the second. Then he started flipping. His hands slowed down around April. By May they had stopped. "These are meal delivery receipts. 147 meals, breakfast or lunch or dinner, depending on her therapy schedule. Each one has a timestamp and my signature." He did not look up. "These are the insurance claim forms I filed on her behalf when her provider denied coverage for her physical therapy sessions. 7 appeals. 4 approved. 3 denied. The denied ones I paid out of pocket." I pulled out the last section. "And these are photos I took to track her recovery progress. Her surgeon asked me to document her mobility each week. The photos. Kristen in a wheelchair, her face turned away from the camera. Kristen attempting to stand. My hands on her forearms, the physical therapist behind her. Kristen sleeping in the hospital bed with a stuffed bear her coworkers had sent. And next to her, visible in the corner of the frame, the arm of a chair. My chair. The one I slept in for 6 weeks because she was afraid of the dark." Theo closed the folder, set both hands flat on top of it. His jaw was tight. His breathing had changed. Shorter, shallower. The way breathing changes when the body absorbs information the mind has not yet processed. "She told me you barely visited. Every day. For 147 days, she told me you made her feel like a burden. On day 93, I collapsed from exhaustion and was admitted to the same hospital. 2 floors up from her room. Nobody came to see me. Not Kristen. Not my mother. That part I had not planned to say. It came out the way things come out when you've been carrying them in a specific place behind your ribs, and someone finally asks the right question." Theo sat there for a long time. The folder under his hands, the photos inside, the evidence of 5 months that my sister had compressed into a sentence. She barely visited. "I need to tell her I know," he said. "No." He looked up. "Do not say anything. She is still my sister. Whatever she told you, whatever she has done, she is still my sister, and I do not want this to ruin what she has with you." My voice was steady. The words were practiced, not because I had rehearsed them, but because I had been saying some version of them my entire life. Do not make it worse. Do not rock the boat. Be the older one. Hold it together. You want me to sit at that dinner and say nothing. Yes. Knowing what I know. Yes. He stood up, walked to the door, stopped, did not turn around. I will try, he said. But I am not built the way you are, Dana. I cannot know something is wrong and pretend it is fine. That is not how I work. I know. But please try. For her, the door closed behind him. The apartment went quiet. The sesame oil had burned off entirely. The stir-fry was ruined. The bell peppers sat on the counter exactly where I had left them, red and green, neatly sliced, waiting for a meal that never got made. I should have known that silence has an expiration date. His lasted 14 days. Mine had lasted 30 years. And the difference between us was not patience. The difference was that he believed the truth should be spoken, and I believed it should be survived. Shay showed up the next morning with 2 coffees, and the look she gets when she already knows everything. Not because anyone told her. Because Shay has been an emergency room nurse for 11 years, and she reads people the way I read billing codes. She sat at my kitchen table, looked at the folder still open on the coffee table, looked at me, and said, "So, tell me about the fiancé." Shay did not ask how I was doing. She does not ask that question because she considers it a waste of a perfectly good sentence. What she does instead is sit at your kitchen table with 2 coffees and wait for you to start talking. And if you do not start talking within 90 seconds, she starts talking for you, and she is usually more accurate than you would be anyway. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The dinner, the ring, the recording, Theo's visit 2 weeks before, the folder, the visitor logs, the look on Connie Brennan's face when the recording played. Shay listened the way she listens to patients in the emergency room, with her whole body pointed at you and her coffee untouched, and her eyes doing something that is not quite sympathy and not quite judgment, but somewhere between the two where the truth lives. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she set her coffee down. "So let me get this straight. You nursed your sister for 5 months. You bought the engagement ring she was wearing, and she introduced you to his entire family as the maid. She held up one finger. Honey, maids get paid. You were a volunteer. The Red Cross sends people like you thank you letters and a tote bag. That was the first time I laughed since the dinner." Short. Surprised. The kind that escapes before you can decide whether you have earned it. But Shay was not finished. She leaned forward, both hands around her coffee, ER nurse posture, the one she uses when she is about to say something the patient does not want to hear. You also let it happen. For 7 years, every single time she rewrote what happened, you smiled and nodded and said nothing. Every time your mother said, "You know how Kristen is," you accepted that as an explanation instead of calling it what it was, an excuse. She paused. "You had the folder, Dana. You had the receipts and the logs and the photos. You could have shown anyone at any point. You chose silence and called it love. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee was cooling. Shay was right, and we both knew it. And the specific pain of being right when you do not want to be is something Shay understands better than most people, because she delivers that kind of news for a living." "What was I supposed to do?" I said. "She was in the hospital. She almost died. She almost died. And then she recovered. And then she spent 6 months telling her boyfriend that you abandoned her. Those are 2 different things. The almost dying earns her compassion. The lying does not." Shay left an hour later. The coffee cups went into the sink. The apartment went quiet again. My phone buzzed 11 times that afternoon. Kristen. Not calling me. Calling everyone else. The first sign appeared on Instagram at 2:17. A story, white text on a black background, the format people use when they want to look serious without looking like they are trying. My own sister tried to humiliate me at my engagement dinner. After everything I survived, after 5 months in the hospital fighting for my life, this is how my family treats me. By 4 o'clock, 3 mutual friends had texted me variations of the same question. What happened at the dinner? Each text was phrased differently but contained the same subtext. Kristen called us. We heard her version. We want to hear yours before we decide. My sister works in marketing. She launched a full campaign in under 3 hours. Social media for the broad audience. Personal calls for the inner circle. A crying voicemail to our mother that I am certain included the phrase, "She has always been jealous of me." Because that is Kristen's go-to headline, and it has worked on Diane for 30 years. The call to Theo came last. Charm mode. The cracking voice. She planned this, Theo. She wanted to humiliate me. Please do not believe her. You know me. Theo's response, which he told me about later, was 6 words. Kristen, I have seen the visitor logs. Then he hung up. Every counterattack Kristen launched that day revealed a little more of what she was. Not to me, to the people she was trying to convince. Because when you tell 12 different people 12 slightly different versions of the same story, and one of those people has 147 receipts that say otherwise, the versions start to bump into each other, and the people holding them start to compare. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the folder next to it and the apartment dark except for the screen. The folder was still open to the photo section. Kristen in the wheelchair. Kristen trying to stand. The arm of my chair in the corner of the frame. My hands were on the keyboard, but I was not typing. I was looking at the folder the way you look at something you have carried for a long time without ever asking yourself why. Evidence. 147 days of it. Organized, tabbed, backed up, filed the way someone files things they expect to need someday. You do not keep evidence of love. You keep evidence of things you are afraid no one will believe. That thought arrived quietly, the way the important ones always do. Not with fanfare, not with tears. Just a sentence that settled into the space between what I had been telling myself and what I had always known. I kept records because I knew, not consciously, not formally, but somewhere underneath the filing and the tabbing and the backing up, I had always known that the day would come when my word would not be enough. When Kristen would rewrite what happened and everyone would believe her version, because her version was warmer and louder and more entertaining than mine. And I would need proof, not because I was paranoid, because I was paying attention. The first time I learned to pay attention like that, I was 14. Kristen was 7. She fell off the monkey bars at Ridgewood Park and broke her arm. I was not there. I was at the public library 3 blocks away, working on a history project that was due Monday. My mother picked Kristen up from the emergency room, brought her home with a cast and a lollipop, and looked at me standing in the kitchen doorway with my backpack still on. "You are the older one," she said. "You should have been watching her." I was at the library. Kristen was at the park with 2 friends and a parent volunteer. There was no version of events in which I was responsible for what happened. But my mother looked at me, and in her face I saw something I would see many more times in the years that followed. Not anger, certainty. The absolute, unshakable belief that when something goes wrong with Kristen, the explanation is Dana. That was the year I started keeping records. Not on purpose, but that was the year I began saving report cards, writing down dates, keeping ticket stubs and receipts in a shoebox under my bed. Because 14-year-old Dana learned something that 37-year-old Dana was only now willing to say out loud. If you cannot prove it happened, it did not happen. And nobody in my family was ever going to take my word for it. The laptop screen glowed in the dark apartment. The cursor blinked. I opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, what I gave. Column B, what Kristen told people. Column C, what actually happened. By midnight, the spreadsheet was 14 rows long. Each row a year, each year a pattern, and for the first time in my life, I was not building a record to survive. I was building a record to fight. The spreadsheet changed things, not because the information was new, because the format was 14 rows, 14 years, each row the same structure. What I gave, what Kristen said I gave, what actually happened. When you see a pattern in a paragraph, you can argue with it. When you see it in a spreadsheet, it argues with you. Row 3. The year Kristen moved to Hartford for her first marketing job. What I gave, co-signed her lease, drove 2 hours every other weekend to help her unpack, stock her fridge, fix her curtains because she said the landlord would not do it. What Kristen told people, she did it all on her own. What actually happened? The landlord had offered to fix the curtains. Kristen wanted me to do it because she said the landlord made her uncomfortable. He did not. She just wanted company but would not say so. Row 9. The year Kristen's appendix burst at 2 in the morning on a Thursday. What I gave, drove 40 minutes to the emergency room, stayed until she was out of surgery, called her boss, called her insurance, picked up her prescriptions. What Kristen told people? Dana overreacted. It was just an appendix. What actually happened? The surgeon told me afterward that another hour could have been peritonitis. 14 years. The same shape every time. The counter campaign Kristen had launched after the dinner lasted roughly 72 hours before it began to collapse under its own weight. The first crack came from a woman named Tessa, who had been Kristen's college roommate and who had received a tearful phone call the morning after the dinner. Tessa texted me on a Wednesday. Kristen says you ambushed her at the engagement dinner. She says you have always been jealous. I want to hear your side before I say anything. Fair. Reasonable. The kind of message that a person sends when they have known someone long enough to suspect that a one-sided story usually has another side. I sent Tessa 3 photos. Kristen in the wheelchair. Kristen's first assisted walk. The visitor log for the month of March. My name on every line. No commentary, no explanation, just the images and the dates. Tessa did not respond for 2 days. When she did, the message was short. I showed these to Jess and Amanda. Kristen told us you visited maybe twice a month. By Friday, the Instagram story had been deleted. Not because Kristen had a change of heart, because the comments had started asking questions she could not answer. What exactly did your sister do during those 5 months? Didn't you say she took care of you? Someone had screenshotted the original story before it disappeared. It was still circulating in a group chat that Kristen was no longer part of. This is what happens when you build a narrative on a foundation that someone else has the blueprints to. Sooner or later, the blueprints get passed around, and people who thought they were standing on solid ground look down and see the cracks. Kristen called our mother 3 times that week. Each call lasted longer than the last. Diane did not call me, not to check in, not to ask what happened, not to take a side. My mother's silence had a specific texture that I had learned to read over 30 years. It was not the silence of someone who is angry. It was the silence of someone who does not know which version of the story to believe anymore and is afraid that choosing will cost her one of her daughters. On Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the dinner, my phone rang. The number was local but not saved in my contacts. I answered. Dana, this is Connie Brennan. The voice was steady, warm in the way that people who have worked with children for decades are warm, not because they are performing warmth, but because they have learned that calm is the most useful thing you can offer someone who is not calm. I wanted to call you because there are some things I need to say, and I did not want to say them through Theo. Okay, I was a school nurse for 22 years. Do you know what that means? It means I spent 2 decades sitting across from children who were being hurt at home and learning how to tell the difference between a kid who fell off a bike and a kid who was pushed. It means I have seen what caregiving looks like. Real caregiving. The kind that costs you sleep and money and pieces of yourself that you do not get back. She paused. And I have seen what ingratitude looks like. The kind that rewrites what someone did for you so that you never have to say thank you. My hand was on the kitchen counter. The other hand was holding the phone. Both were still. What your sister said at that dinner was not a joke. It was not playful. It was cruel, and it was calculated. And every person at that table knew it the moment the words left her mouth. My husband knew it. Bet knew it. And Theo knew it, because Theo had already seen the truth. And he sat there watching the woman he loved lie to his family's faces. The kitchen was very quiet. You are not the maid, sweetheart. You never were. And I wanted you to hear that from someone who has no stake in your family's story. Someone with no reason to take your side except that your side is the truth. Something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a crack in the place behind my sternum where I had been keeping everything organized and filed and tabbed and backed up for 30 years. The place where ISTJ people store the things they cannot afford to feel while they are still processing the facts. The tears came without sound. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and my eyes running and my mouth closed, and I did not make a single noise because that is how I cry. Quietly. Efficiently. Even my grief has a filing system. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Connie? And you are welcome. The call ended. The kitchen stayed quiet. The spreadsheet was still open on my laptop, 14 rows of evidence that a stranger had just validated in 4 minutes, with nothing but her voice and her 30 years of watching people. The next call came 2 hours later. Kristen. Not the cracking voice, not the marketing voice, the angry one. The one that comes out when the campaign is failing and the target audience is not responding the way the metrics predicted. This is your fault. You humiliated me in front of his entire family. You played that recording to hurt me. Everything that is happening right now is because of you. Kristen, Theo came to my apartment 2 weeks before the dinner. He came to yell at me. Because of what you told him about the hospital. He came to defend you. I let that settle. I showed him the visitor logs, and he changed his mind in 6 minutes. That is not manipulation. That is math. You had no right to show him those. You called me the maid, in front of 12 people, while wearing a ring I paid for, after 5 months that you erased from history. My voice was the same voice I use when an insurance provider denies a claim that should have been approved. Flat. Factual. Final. I am done, Kristen. I am done paying for things and pretending I did not pay. I am done showing up and pretending it does not count. And I am done keeping quiet so that your version of the story is the only one anyone hears. Dana, wait. Goodbye, Kristen. The phone went face down on the counter. My hands were shaking. Not during. After. That is how it works with me. The performance is steady. The cost comes later, when no one is watching. 2 weeks after the dinner, on a Saturday morning, Theo called. His voice was quiet, tired, the voice of someone who has spent 14 days building a decision 1 brick at a time and has finally placed the last one. Can we talk? He said. I have made a decision. Theo chose a coffee shop on the Post Road, halfway between his parents' house and Kristen's apartment. Neutral ground. Public enough that no one would raise their voice. Quiet enough that what needed to be said could be said at the volume it deserved. He told me about it 3 days later, sitting in the same chair in my living room where he had sat 2 weeks before the dinner, with a folder full of visitor logs and a face full of something he could not yet name. This time, his hands were empty. His voice was different, not angry, not confused, just finished. She was already there when I walked in, he said, sitting at a table by the window. She had ordered my coffee for me. Black, 1 sugar. She remembered how I take it. That is the thing about Kristen. She remembers the small things. She remembers your coffee order and your mother's birthday and the name of your childhood dog. She files those details away and deploys them at exactly the right moment. And for a long time, I thought that was love. He paused. It is not love. It is inventory. Kristen had started talking before he sat down. The cracking voice. The version of events where everything that happened at the dinner was a misunderstanding, where the recording was taken out of context, where I had always been jealous and had finally found a way to act on it. She talked for about 8 minutes, Theo said, and the whole time, I kept thinking about something one of my students said last year, a 15-year-old named Marcus. We were studying primary sources in the Civil War unit, and Marcus raised his hand and said, "Mr. Brennan, how come every time somebody lies in a letter, they write more words?" And I told him that was one of the smartest things anyone had ever said in my classroom. He looked at his hands. Kristen used a lot of words. When she finished, Theo said one thing. He had been building it for 2 weeks, turning it over, testing it against every version of events Kristen had given him since they met. And when it came out, it was not a speech. It was not an accusation. It was the kind of sentence a teacher constructs when he wants the student to understand not just what went wrong, but why it matters. "I keep coming back to one thing," he told her. "You had someone who gave up her life for 5 months to take care of you, who bathed you and fed you and slept in a chair beside your bed, and you stood in front of my family and called her the Maid. While wearing a ring she paid for with money you told her was lost." He paused. "You meant every word, Kristen. That is what scares me. Not that you said it, that you meant it," Kristen cried. "Real tears this time," Theo said. "Not the campaign tears. The ones that come when the marketing stops working and there is nothing left underneath but the actual person." "I can change," she said. "Give me a chance. I was scared, and I was angry, and I took it out on the wrong person. You took it out on the person who saved you. That is not anger. That is character." He slid the ring across the table. Kristen stared at it. The diamond caught the overhead light and threw a small line of color across the wood, the same way it had thrown color across the tablecloth at the dinner. A beautiful thing bought with borrowed money from a woman who was called a maid for providing it. "I am going to mail this to your sister," Theo said. "She paid for it." He stood up, walked to the door, did not look back. Not because he was making a statement, because he was trying not to cry in a coffee shop on the post road at 11 in the morning, and looking back would have broken the only thing he had left, which was the certainty that he was doing the right thing. Kristen sat alone at the table with an empty ring finger and 2 cups of coffee, one of which she had ordered for a man who was no longer coming back. 4 days after Theo's visit to the coffee shop, my mother showed up at my front door without calling first. This had not happened in years. "Diane Calloway calls ahead." She confirms. She manages expectations. Showing up unannounced meant that whatever she had come to say could not survive the distance of a phone call. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Shay had sat with coffee, the same table where the spreadsheet had been built. The kitchen was becoming a courtroom, and I had not planned it that way. But that is what happens when your home is the place where the truth keeps showing up whether you invited it or not. "Show me everything," she said. "No preamble. No let me explain. No let's not do this here. Just show me." The laptop was on the counter. The folder was in the cabinet. The recording was on my phone. The spreadsheet was saved on my desktop under a file name I had chosen carefully. 14 years. Diane read the visitor logs first. Her eyes moved down the columns, the way eyes move when they are counting something they do not want to count. Then the receipts. Then the insurance correspondence. Then the photos. Kristen in the wheelchair. Kristen's first walk. The arm of my chair in the corner of the frame. She spent a long time on the photos. Longer than on the numbers? Because numbers are abstract, but a photograph of your daughter in a wheelchair being pushed by your other daughter is not abstract. It is specific and undeniable, and it sits in front of you with a date stamp and a story that does not match the one you have been telling yourself. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 12. Then Diane closed the laptop and set both hands flat on the table, and when she looked up, her face was not the face I expected. I expected defensiveness. I expected you know how she is. I expected the wall. What I got was a question. How long has she been doing this? 6 words. And inside those 6 words, an admission that changed the shape of everything. Because how long means Diane already knew there was something to measure. How long means this was not a surprise. How long means my mother had seen the pattern, had suspected the pattern, had lived alongside the pattern for years, and had chosen not to ask the question until the evidence was sitting on her daughter's kitchen table in a folder with 5 tabs. How long have you been not asking? I said. Diane's mouth trembled. Not the polished tremble of a woman who is performing emotion. The raw tremble of a woman who has just heard her own silence named out loud. She cried. Not for Kristen, not for the dinner, not for the engagement. For herself. For 30 years of, let's not do this here, and you know how she is, and you are the older one. For every time she chose peace over truth and called it parenting. I told you when you were 14 that it was your job to take care of her, she said. At the hospital, when she broke her arm, you were at the library, and I told you it was your fault. Yes, that was wrong. I am sorry. The kitchen held still. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor started a lawnmower, and the sound was so ordinary and so out of place that it almost made me laugh. Thank you for saying that, Mom. I should have said it 23 years ago. Yes, you should have. She did not flinch. She took it, because she knew she had earned it. I need you to understand something, I said. I am not going to be the responsible one anymore. Not the way I was. If Kristen calls you crying, I need you to not call me to fix it. If something breaks in her life, I need you to let it stay broken until she picks up the pieces herself. I understand, and I need you to tell her the truth, not a version that protects her feelings. The truth, the real one, the one you just read. Diane nodded, stood up, put on her coat, walked to the door, turned around one more time. You are a good sister, Dana. You always were. Even when I made it harder than it should have been. The door closed. The lawnmower outside stopped. The kitchen went quiet in the specific way it goes quiet when something has ended and something else has not yet begun. 3 days later, a small padded envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, the ring, and a note in Theo's handwriting, neat and slanted, the handwriting of a man who teaches 9th graders and still believes in cursive. 4 words. This belongs to you. The ring sat on my kitchen windowsill for a long time after that. Not worn, not sold, not thrown away. Just there, catching the morning light. A $4,000 reminder of what I had paid for and what I had stopped paying for. Victory is supposed to feel like something. In the movies, there is music. A slow zoom on the protagonist's face. The audience knows they have won because the score tells them so. There was no score. There was a ring on my windowsill and a spreadsheet on my laptop, and a sister who was no longer engaged, and a mother who had apologized for the first time in 23 years. These were victories, every single one, and they sat in my apartment like furniture I had not yet learned to arrange. The ring bothered me most. Not because of what it cost, because of what it meant. $4,000 I had sent without asking questions for a woman who had looked at 12 strangers and called me the help. The ring was proof of 2 things at once, that my sister would lie to get what she wanted, and that I would give it to her anyway. Both of those things were true, and neither of them had changed yet, and I was not sure which one I needed to fix first. I ran into Martin Brennan at the grocery store on a Thursday evening. Produce section. He was holding a bag of shrimp and reading the label with the focused attention of a man who has been given a very specific shopping list. Dana, he said. Not surprised. Not performative. Just my name, delivered the way a retired contractor says things, with exactly enough force and not a syllable more. Mr. Brennan. Martin. He set the shrimp in his cart. Looked at me for a moment. My wife told me about your phone call, she cried after. He paused. Connie does not cry, so that tells me something. The produce section hummed with refrigerator noise and the soft percussion of someone stacking apples nearby. The appetizers were good, by the way, he said, before everything went sideways at the dinner. Good shrimp. He looked at the bag in his cart, trying to recreate them. Connie says I cannot, but I have a theory about the marinade. Something loosened behind my ribs. Not laughter. Exactly. Something adjacent to it. The feeling you get when a quiet man says a small thing, and the small thing holds more weight than a speech. I hope the marinade works out, I said. Me too, he nodded once. Pushed his cart down the aisle. That was the entire conversation. 60 seconds. And somehow, it was enough. The report from Diane came the following week. Not in person, over the phone. Her voice had a quality I had not heard before. Something stripped down, like a room that had been emptied of furniture and was still deciding what to put back. She had gone to Kristen's apartment. She had sat at Kristen's kitchen table the way she had sat at mine, and she had said the words she told me she would say, because whatever else my mother is, she is a woman who keeps promises once she finally makes them. I told her the truth, Diane said. I told her she lied to me. She lied to you. She lied to that boy. I told her I have spent 30 years making excuses for her behavior, and I am done. What did she say? She asked if I was choosing you over her, and I told her I was not choosing anyone. I was telling her the truth for the first time. And the truth is that she was wrong. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Diane added, almost as an afterthought, she did not yell. She did not cry. She just sat there. That scared me more than anything. The midnight call came 11 days later. My phone lit up at 1:47 in the morning. Kristen, not a text, a call. The kind of call that people make when texting is not enough, and waiting until morning is not possible. And the only thing left is the sound of another person's voice, confirming that you still exist. I picked up. I do not know why. Maybe because 30 years of being the older sister does not switch off at 1:47, even when you have spent the last 3 weeks trying to unlearn it. She did not speak right away. There was breathing, then a sound that was not quite crying and not quite talking. The sound a person makes when they are standing at the edge of something honest and are not sure the ground will hold. I do not know why I said it. Her voice was stripped of everything. No marketing, no charm, no strategy. Just a woman alone in an apartment at 1 in the morning, talking to the person she hurt the most. I do not know why I do any of it. I do not know why I told Theo those things about you. I do not know why I took the money. I do not know why I stood in front of those people and said what I said. I keep trying to find the reason, and there is nothing there. Just me. The apartment was dark. The ring was on the windowsill. The refrigerator hummed. I do, I said. Silence. You said it because you have been saying it to yourself for years. That I am just the help. That what I did does not count. Because if it counts, then you owe me something you have never wanted to owe anyone. Gratitude. And gratitude means admitting you needed me. And admitting you needed me means admitting you were not strong enough on your own. And that is the one thing you have never been willing to say. The breathing on the other end changed. Slower. Heavier. Can we fix this? I do not know, but I know it does not start with a phone call at 1 in the morning. It starts with you telling the truth to one person, just one, without me having to play a recording first. The line went quiet, then a click, then nothing. I set the phone face down on the nightstand, pulled the blanket up, looked at the ceiling for a long time, and for the first time in 30 years, I did not feel responsible for what happened next. 3 months later, the apartment still smelled like fresh paint. Not because the paint was fresh, because I had chosen a color called winter linen that apparently never stopped smelling like a decision, which seemed appropriate. The promotion came through in October, senior billing coordinator. Same hospital, same department, different title, different office, different chair that did not squeak when I leaned back to think. My boss had pulled me aside in September and said, "You have been doing this job at a senior level for 2 years. We are just now catching the paperwork up to reality." Which was, If you think about it, the story of my life told in one sentence by a man who did not know he was telling it. Shay came over on a Saturday with takeout and a bottle of wine that cost more than her usual budget, which meant she was celebrating something or worried about something, and with Shay, those two things often look the same. "You seem different," she said, pulling containers out of the bag. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you put something down?" "I stopped carrying two people's weight. Turns out you walk faster with just your own." She looked at me over the pad thai. The ER nurse look. The one that sees past what you are saying to what you are actually telling her. "Good," she said. "About time." Kristen and I had spoken twice since the midnight call. Both conversations were short. Both were uncomfortable. Both were real. That was new. Uncomfortable and real had never coexisted in our family before. We had always chosen comfortable and false, the way you choose a chair that looks nice but does not actually support your back. She had started therapy. Not because I asked, because Diane had gone to her apartment a second time and said, "Go, or I am done too," and whatever Diane lacked in timing, she had apparently found in follow-through, because Kristen went. Every Tuesday at 4. Whether it was helping, I did not know. Whether it would last, I could not say. But she was going, and that was the first thing Kristen had done in a long time that was not for an audience. We were not healed. We were not broken. We were somewhere in between where the light comes through, but the walls are still cracked, and neither of us was pretending the cracks were not there. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The call from Connie came on a Wednesday. "Dana, it is Connie. I am calling to invite you to Sunday dinner. Martin has been working on a shrimp recipe for 3 months, and he is convinced this is the batch. I am less convinced, but the man bought a thermometer specifically for this, so we are committed. Connie, I appreciate that, but I do not want things to be awkward with Theo. Theo moved to a new school district in September. He is not here." A pause. "This is not about Theo. This is about the fact that Martin liked you, I liked you, and Bet asks about you every time she calls from Michigan. You sat at our table once under terrible circumstances, and I would like you to sit at it again under better ones." The kitchen was quiet. The ring was on the windowsill. The winter light was coming through at a low angle, the way it does in Connecticut in November, when the sun gives up early but makes the most of the hours it has. "Tell Martin I like shrimp," I said. "He will be thrilled." He has a theory about the marinade. I have heard Saturday morning. My kitchen. 1 plate on the table, 1 cup of coffee. No delivery to prepare. No insurance forms to file for someone else. No meal to package and drive across town. Just a woman at her own table, in her own apartment, eating breakfast at the pace she wanted to eat it. The ring sat on the windowsill in a small box I had found at a craft store, the kind meant for earrings. $4,000 of diamond and metal, catching the morning light the way it had caught the chandelier at the dinner and the overhead fluorescent at the coffee shop. It had been on my sister's hand, and then on a cafe table, and then in a padded envelope. And now here, not worn, not sold, not hidden, just present, a reminder that I had paid for something, and that I had stopped paying. There is a version of this story where the ending is clean, where sisters reconcile at a kitchen table and cry and hug and promise to do better, and everything is forgiven in a single afternoon. That is a beautiful story. It is not this one. This story ends at a table, but it is my table. And the woman sitting at it is not the woman who sat at the Brennan dinner 3 months ago. That woman would have heard the word maid and swallowed it, would have smoothed her napkin and looked at her plate and added it to the long list of things she survived by pretending they did not happen. This woman stood up. That is the difference, not the evidence, not the recording, not the spreadsheet, or the visitor logs, or the $4,000. The difference is that somewhere between the first bell pepper I sliced on a Tuesday evening and the last conversation I had with my sister at 1 a.m, I stopped believing that silence was the same thing as strength. It is not. Silence is just silence. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is open her mouth at a dinner table and say, "This is what the maid did." If someone in your life has been calling you the help, the invisible one, the one who holds everything together while they stand in the light and take the credit, I want you to hear something that took me 30 years to say out loud. You are not the maid. You are the foundation. And foundations do not apologize for standing. If you have spent years being the one who shows up, the one who cooks and cleans and drives and pays and never asks for credit, this story is not about a dinner table. It is about the moment you decide that your silence is no longer protecting anyone. It is only protecting the people who benefit from you staying quiet. The hardest lesson Dana learned was not that her sister was ungrateful. She already knew that. The hardest lesson was that she had been keeping records for years because deep down she never believed her own family would take her word for it. And she was right. So here is the question worth sitting with tonight. If you stop doing everything you do for the people who never thank you, how long would it take them to notice?